So, good morning again, everyone, and welcome back to our next topic on our subject philosophy. And for this topic, we are going to talk about freedom itself. Yun. So, pag-uusapan naman natin ngayon anything and everything about freedom itself. Okay, so in this first slide, you are going to see like a very simple picture or a diagram showing na there are uh, two birds like they came out of the cage going out in the real world, and somehow it's partly symbolizes the whole topic for this whole morning that we are going to discuss. So moving forward on the next slides, might as well I would like to advise you then lahat ng mapapakinig, lahat ng makikita nyo sa mga slides are the essentials of the philosophical aspect of the subject itself. Okay, none of it is part of my opinion, and it was all derived accordingly to our resources. Okay, so let us move forward then to our next slide. So, reading from this next slide that we have, it can be said in here that freedom is a widely applied concept in different branches of philosophy. For the sake of focus, however, it would be important to clarify what we mean by freedom in this lesson. Okay, so I know somehow focusing on the word itself, diba, freedom. So you need to realize that the kind of freedom that we are talking about in here is the freedom in philosophical aspect, although it covers the literal meaning of it, the freedom itself, diba? Sa Tagalog, kalayaan, kung tawagin natin. So, the type of freedom, diba? Yung uri daw ng kalayaan na i-discuss natin dito, this is somehow connected in this, one of the core concept of understanding the philosophy of mankind. Okay, so let's move forward. Ngayon naman, we will begin with the important distinction between positive and negative freedom according to Isaiah Berlin. Yan. So just to give you a proper heads up, the guy you're seeing right now on our slide, siya po si Isaiah Berlin. He is rather one of the most influential person ever to come up with two principles of freedom. Diba? Yung tinatawag nating positive freedom and negative freedom. All right. So whenever the word freedom comes out and whenever it is being discussed, so somehow I am having the impression that one of the few things that comes to your mind is liberty itself, diba? Liberation, freedom. That is the sense of you not being enchained by an idea, diba? Or a person or a government, diba? Malaya ka eh. And most of us, especially on your teenage days, di ba? Kayong mga audience ko ngayon, our dear students, sa age bracket nyo, at yung mga young adult natin dyan, so I know somehow you can relate to this. You are in the stage where you are exploring anything and everything beyond your means. Di ba? Kaya nga, kayong mga nasa explore stage, you tend to liberate yourselves from the concept that you have to follow some certain rules which really do not jive or connect with you at all, di ba? Halimbawa na lang perfect example sa mga yan kapatid nating members ng LGBT community, yung mga LGBTQ+, kung meron pa man dagdag. So there are certain values and certain standards na for them will impose a threat, or let's say will restrict them from freely doing anything that is within their means or natural senses, di ba? Another example sa mga kapatid natin dyan na those who follow strict religious, let's say, values, di ba? Or let's say, inherited family values, yung mga galing sa conservative na pamilya, yung may certain religion na medyo maraming restriction o bawal. So yun, somehow, knowing the fact that you have to interact with each other, be it on the real world or the digital world, it always creates clashes between ideas, di ba? It always creates a point of disagreement to some facts and figures, diba? In which in reality, hindi nyo naman dapat pagtalunan yan, diba? So on that point, that is why we have to distinct between the positive and the negative freedom, because that will certainly explain why that kind of thing is happening, diba? Especially nowadays, that one of the greatest influence for our teenagers then is the predominance of social media in their lives. Diba? Sabi nga, sa mundong ginagalawan nyo ngayon, you have two worlds to live in. One is your physical world, and one is your digital world. Diba? Minsan nga, mas mahalaga pa yung, sa iba ha, hindi ko nilalahat, mas mahalaga pa sa kanila yung number of views, ba, number of likes and shares. Diba? Hindi pa nagbe-breakfast yung mga yan, pero mas concerned sila sa status ng kanilang whatever social media platform they are going with. Diba? So it's not all about Facebook. So marami pang iba. Yung iba, it's up for you to discover. Diba? Sabi ko nga sa Medlit, do your own research palagi. Diba? And so let's move forward then. I'm excited to tell you those concepts, simple concepts about the negative and positive freedom. So let us read, let us read one of the famous quote of Isaiah Berlin sa kanyang concept of positive and negative freedom. So it can be read in here that the fundamental sense of freedom is freedom from chains, from imprisonment, from enslavement by others. The rest is extension of this sense, or else metaphor. Iyon. So medyo mahirap siyang intindihan at the first glance, I know. But to cut the long story short then, it can be read from here that yung totoong sense daw ng freedom para sa iba, or para sa lahat, sabi niya, is you will gain that feeling if you are not being enchained. Hindi ka nakakadena, or hindi ka nakakulong, or hindi ka alipin ng literal ng iba. Diba? So be it ibang tao, ibang gobyerno, ibang paniniwala, at ibang philosophical belief, really doesn't matter then. And the rest of the things that you believe in, that is just an extension of your sense, or else a metaphor in your life. Diba? So it means, it comes to a point that if you do have that feeling pala na like you are entitled to such great things, at feeling mo ay hindi ka na-restrict because of your advantages in the society. So it means that you would have that sense of freedom. Diba? Remember, in this kind of philosophy, uulitin ko in this kind of philosophy, yung freedom, that leads someone to like have a fulfilling life, diba? Given the fact that that certain person is either not being enslaved by others, or being, let's say, being kept in a box, di ba? Nasa four corners ng isang paniniwala o ng isang concept. And unless otherwise daw, na ma-emancipate mo yung sarili mo doon, or you do, or keep away with those boxing ideas or concept, yung mga bagay na parang inilalagay ka sa kahon, parang ikay ikinukulong at parang ikay nakatali palagi sa certain rules. Diba? It is therefore concluded that you are not experiencing that kind of satisfactory freedom, which is Isaiah Berlin is acknowledging of. Okay, so let's find out more about this positive and negative freedom on our next slides. So take a look very well at this first image you have here with us on our slide. Sabi dito, negative freedom can be best described, diba, by this figure, which is you are free from someone else's belief, you are free from someone else's authority, and practically you are not a slave to no man, diba? So it's like, let us put into simple terms, diba? Parang hindi ka tuta ni naman, hindi ka hawag sa leeg ni naman, diba? So that is the very essence of the negative freedom itself. And it can be best further defined by these upcoming slides. So, taking from here, let's see the next slide. Okay, so it is being said in here that negative freedom is somehow also termed to be as total freedom. And remember, sa total freedom, yung tinatawag nating absolute freedom, eventually, it will ironically provide more freedom to the strongest and less freedom for the weakest. Bakit? So let's say, for example, ito yung isang perfect example ng both sides ng negative freedom. So given the fact, diba, let's say on the brighter side of it, you're not being controlled, you are not being governed by anyone else or anything in this world. Might as well you have to remember. So ibig sabihin pala pag sa negative freedom, by virtue of you are being able to absolutely do everything that you want then, because you believe as long as it satisfies your soul, it satisfies your mind, diba? It satisfies yourself as a whole. So if you have many resources, if you have everything in this world, that would be a total advantage to you, diba? But the question is, what if you do not have one of those? What if you are one of those people who is struggling to, diba, to live every day of their lives? Yung mga tinatawag nating isang kaig, isang tuka. Diba? Do you think they are able to enjoy this whole essence of total freedom? Ask yourselves, diba? Sino nga ba ang tunay na malaya? There are many people saying that somehow I am very lucky because I am enjoying 2 jobs, 4 payslips in a month, and everything, di ba? Parang seemingly we have all of the advantages that this world has to offer them. But then come to think of it, di ba? Me myself, for example, I am a slave to my own time. Bakit? When it's time for me to go to office, I have to go to the office. If it's time to me to visit the school, we have to go to the school. Diba? And if it's time to me to do our administrative jobs, monitoring, to even answer unsolicited questions, diba, yung mga biglang nagtatanong at the middle of the night, we have to take our time then. Why? Because we can never apply the concept of total freedom to ourselves then. Diba? Minsan, there are certain times where we want to do things our ways, even as teachers, but we have to follow a certain standard. Di ba? Halimbawa na lang yung method ng delivery ng lesson by using our Google Classrooms. All of those are being agreed upon by us before even opening up the season for the class. Di ba? Come to think about it. Imagine mo yung kung iba't ibang modes of instructions ang ginagamit namin. Just imagine, di ba? Just for the sake of fulfilling everyone's desire, of fulfilling everyone's, let's say, individuality by virtue that we are different in every way. We have different patterns on how we are able to, let's say, capture and deliver our lessons. Diba? Mahirap. There is no uniformity at all. Diba? And yun yung isa sa mga masasabi kong tawag dito. Mga hindi masyadong magandang epekto ng negative freedom being as a total freedom concept. Diba? Imagine, the strongest will survive on that kind of philosophical idea. How about those weak ones, di ba? Does it mean in a total freedom, you can put justice in your hand? Di ba? And by the virtue that you can put justice to your hand because it's a total freedom, do you think it would be like equally pleasuring to yourself to do unto others kung ano man yung kamali ang ginawa nila sa inyo? Di ba? Do you believe it would make you one more of a better person than the other? So come to think about it. Diba? The word total freedom is a very dangerous word. Masarap lang siya pakinggan in a sense that it's true that you can be able to enjoy your liberty or freedom at once. But then life itself, when you came to think about it, it's not all about enjoyment. Diba? If you do believe your goal in life is to be happy, I don't know if you live a happy life after all. Diba? The human person itself is a needing being, and the human person itself is a biological being. And always remember, we are also social and economical beings. It's not all about happiness. Diba? It's not all about freedom itself. Diba? You want liberty from your society, from your governance, diba? Even from the smallest unit of government, which is your family. Diba? And what do you gain from it? Diba? Total freedom. Do you think it would be applicable to you right now? But these are just self-thought-provoking thoughts na pwede kong may share sa inyo in the nicest way. Diba? Because coming to think of it, just like you and just like everyone else, I also came to the point where I explored everything. Diba? I sought out, I seek for total freedom. I seek for independence. Diba? And it taught me life-changing lessons. Why? That was when the time I experienced failures. Because that was the time I realized we can never, ever attain and maintain, diba? Yung pinapangarap nating equalitarian society. No, that's not gonna happen. The society itself told us in history, is telling us right now, and will continue to tell us in the future, that if we do not cope up with our society and we do not abide with existing laws, diba? You are like not bound to be an island yourself, diba? No man is an island nga eh. So let's find out some other concepts on our next slide then. So by overall definition, negative freedom refers to the absence of interference. By interference, we mean something that is intentionally imposed on a person It may come in a form of physical coercion, such as imprisonment, or verbal coercion, such as the issuing of threats to another person, which is negative freedom in a sense, di ba? When we do not experience any form of coercion. Yan. So, sabi dito, it is best being defined then. The negative freedom itself refers to the absence of interference. Ano yung tinatawag nating interference? Ito yung mga bagay na nag-interfere, mga nag-intervene, di ba? Mga nagko-cross sa path natin of like what? Like fulfilling something or doing something by our own desire. Di ba? Be it intentionally caused by other person, be it by a physical coercion, di ba? Nung mga araw. Why is it that you are afraid to go out of your house, di ba? When you are not being told to that you can do so. Diba? Kasi may concept ng palo, may concept ng pagagalitan ka. Diba? Physical coercion, papaluin ka, corporal punishment. That is physical coercion. Diba? Iba, ikukulong sa kwarto. It's part of discipline. Meron naman tinatawag na verbal coercion. Diba? O, lalaki ka, magra-rides ka, di ka pinayagan ng asawa mo. O, nagbanta, di ka makakauwi pag naglalakad. That is a verbal coercion. Diba? Be it a direct or indirect threat to another person, di ba? Be it sarcastic or let's say direct to the point. Diba? The point in here is that it was verbally delivered. So it's considered as a verbal coercion. Di ba? And the whole point of this matter is that somehow negative freedom itself is very hard to attain nowadays. Diba? Kaya nga, it remains to be a concept, but it's not a self-lying concept. Kaya nga, sa lesson na to, magkasabay na itinuturo ang negative freedom at positive freedom. Diba? These are two conflicting elements, but they work like yin-yang, diba? So, there should be rather balance in some ways that you are practicing these types of freedom. Okay? So, ibig sabihin pala, the freedom itself, you cannot choose independently from those two choices. They have to work together. They have to be in proper balance. Diba? May oras na ikaw yung masusunod, may oras na you have to follow. Diba? Sabi nga natin, sabi ko nga sa mga subordinates ko noon, a good leader is a good follower. Diba? You obey first before you complain. Diba? So those are simple concepts, especially if you are under a tutelage of some kind of leadership or an organizing body. Diba? If you are part of an organization. So, hindi mo pwedeng practice yung negative freedom sa sarili mo by that virtue. Bakit? It will come to a point that it will show that you yourself is somehow, or let's say would be, a very selfish person indeed. Diba? You will come to a point that you will develop this narcissistic behavior. Diba? Ano yung narcissism? Yun yung mahal na mahal mo yung sarili mo. Diba? Mukha mo na nga, wallpaper mo pa sa computer, wallpaper mo pa sa cellphone, mukha mo na nga yun. O, di ba? Sa sobrang pagmamahal mo sa sarili mo, lahat ng picture frame sa bahay mo, mukha mo pa rin. Diba? You're so much in love with yourself. Diba? That such narcissistic act or behavior, hindi ka lang aware, you are practicing your negative freedom by then. Diba? You don't care anymore if whatever things you say in social media, whatever things you upload on your, let's say, on your TikTok account. Kasi what you feel, it's what you say. Diba? You don't consider other things or take things for granted, rather, at that part. Bakit? It makes you feel like no ever person or an organization or even let's say, a governing law can be able to uh, have the scope of limitation on your part upon doing such things. Diba? Hindi ka nagpapasakop sa Tagalog. Ayaw mong magpasakop at never kang magpapasakop. Diba? Negative freedom. Kaya nga minsan, mahirap pagbati ng mga magbiyanan. Oh, that's like part of the Filipino culture. Diba? Yung iba, I don't know. But baka na-experience na ito ng iba, diba? Or narinig na nila sa kwento. Siyempre, iba mag-aasawa, dadalhin yung babae sa side ng lalaki. I mean, this is a very basic story. And it's a very common story to all Filipinos. Yung babae, titira sa side ng lalaki. Siyempre, lahat ng female is picture, lahat ng babae doon sa side ng lalaki. Lahat yun nakatingin sa asawa ng lalaki. And why is that? It's for interference. Bakit? Is it intentional? Yes, it is. Why? Because there is always a point of, let's say, a point of comparison, di ba? How you manage your household, how they manage their household. Because they are all females, you are female. Di ba? Nanay ka, nanay siya. There will be always a basis for comparison. And if you do not tend to go under their cloak or let's say go under their tutelage, hindi ka susunod, magkakaroon ng verbal coercion. Bakit? You do believe that yours is right and theirs is right. Diba? So somehow, may mag-give way. And mind to tell you, it's not them who is going to give way. That is a very common story. Diba? And one way of keeping us, let's say, not being able to coerce with each other from time to time then. That's why we have to follow some rules, be it spoken or non-spoken. But somehow, it would be better if we always set proper expectations and standard in everything that you do. Diba? Kahit nung may face-to-face na klase, I always tell my students, I really don't care how loud is your noise as long as it does not affect the other class and as long as it is an academic noise. Diba? I would never interfere with your freedom to celebrate for any correct activity, for any high passing rate. Bahala kayo dyan. Maghihiyawan kayo. As long as you do not disturb others. Diba? And later we will discuss about that. As long as concepts, yan, diba? Things that we have to consider in return when practicing our freedom. So let us see this next slide then. So on this slide, we can best see the foremost definition of the term itself, which defines the presence of negative freedom, coercion. So you can see in here, coercion is the practice of persuading someone to do something by using force or threats. Yan. So, ibig sabihin, if someone is persuading others, diba? Nangungumbinsi sila ng may halong pananakot, ng may halong pamimwersa, or may halong pagbabanta. Diba? They are practicing coercion. Diba? The guy itself is coercive. Yan. So, be mindful of this kind of person, diba? Who just to gain respect out of others, who just to gain power and authority over others, will practice using brute force and threatening someone else, diba? Tatandaan nyo to palagi itong short verse na sasabihin ko sa inyo. Diba? It is when your brain stops working, your muscle goes to action. Diba? Kaya nga may mga nagsusuntukan biglaan. Bakit? Their brains stop working. Diba? Tumitigil na yung train of thoughts nila towards understanding each other. They just resort to what? Nagbubunong braso na lang para matapos ng lahat, di ba? Nagkakapalitan na lang ng suntukan. Yung iba, biglang nagkakarayot. Bakit? Their minds are not that, let's say, practiced to understand, to comprehend matters which concerns the concept of peace and freedom and respect in itself. Diba? Di na magkaintindihan. Simple misunderstandings. Nagsisigawan. Diba? Remember, it is when you close your ear to listen, that is the time when you open your mouth to shout at someone else. Diba? You should be a good listener towards others. Diba? Why? That is one thing which is, let's say, walang mawawala sa'yo kapag ginawa mo. Diba? And, let's say, hindi rin naman magiging yung iba sa'yo kapag ginawa nila sa'yo. Diba? Simply listening to someone else's predicament. Diba? Just not to resort to coercion. Yan. So always remember, we have this very simple concept. On our next slide, basahin natin to. Sabi ni John Stuart Mill during that time, diba? John Stuart Mill preceded in his publication The Harm Principle. Diba? You should be free to act unless you harm others. Diba? Hanggat hindi ka nakakaapekto sa iba. Diba? Yun ang sabi niya. That is the time that you can actually do what you want unless you harm others. Diba? That is the harm principle. So much for that. That is I do believe somehow you were able to catch something on our concept of negative freedom. And on the next video, I am going to highlight its opposite then, yung tinatawag nating positive freedom. So thank you and good morning everyone.